Join us to build bridges of unity.
Thank you very much for staying with us. My guest is Dr. Yima Sen. Dr. Sen is an academician. He teaches at the Base University here in the nation's capital. He's a member of the Northern Elders Forum and also a member of the Arewa Research and Development Program. Dr. Sen, thank you so much for finding time to join us.
Thank you, Imani.
All right, so the Kaduna Conference is expected to hold Wednesday and Thursday this week.
Yes.
What would you say is the underlying basis for holding this conference?
Like you said earlier, there hasn't quite come out what you might call a northern position on the restructuring debate thus far. The Kaduna Conference is one of the interventions, among others, that are in the process, are in the works. For example, the Northern Elders Forum has been working on a position on restructuring. I've actually been involved in that process. And the Northern governors and the Northern traditional rulers also have a committee that is trying to interrogate or problematize restructuring. I'm also involved in the technical committee of that process. There is also this conference this week where I'm presenting a paper which is, if you like, a major meeting to bring together people from different backgrounds within the 19 northern states to also address this problem. So we sort of are working towards what may eventually emerge as a northern consensual position within the context of a national consensual position on restructuring. I think we believe that in the course of building nations, you must continue to negotiate and dialogue and discuss as you go. And as far as restructuring goes, let me tell you that from my research so far, in terms of general academic or scholarly work, and then this recent focus on restructuring in Nigeria, I've come to realize that we have actually been doing a lot of restructuring since 1914. It has been an incremental process where at every step we have done some form of restructuring. And even earlier you talked about the process in the National Assembly, which is also restructuring. You call it the nexus between restructuring and constitutional amendment, but it's the same thing. It's actually one and the same. And in fact, what you just said is going to happen at the level of state assemblies is quite salutary. Because if you have autonomy of those state assemblies, then you're going to improve governance within the states. And those states are federal components of our federation. So if you have a form of decentralization of power to the states, and the states are not performing well, then it is going to affect the performance of the overall performance of the federation. So that is what salutary news.
Yeah. Now, it's quite interesting to hear you say that, contrary to the general perception out there, that the North has been very opposed to restructuring. It's quite interesting to hear you say that the North has actually been working and brainstorming and thinking all along about this entire process of restructuring.
Yeah,
where did that perception come from?
If you look at the history of Nigeria, the South has been more westernized. And the Western system is more loquacious. The Northern system has cultures which are more taciturn. You have, for example, the Kule culture in some of the northern communities. It's a culture that does not quite speak out so much. And even when they're doing things, they may not come out to shout on the rooftops. So a lot has been going on. I must tell you, I drove to this studio from Kaduna this morning for the purpose of this discussion. And I was there in a hotel room working on my paper. And this paper is benefiting a lot from what it has earned from what I'm doing in other communities. Like I told you, the Northern Elders Forum position. They have a 100-page plus document on restructuring, which is still in the works. It's still being refined. And it is giving a lot of respect to the positions from other parts of the country. Because we have been looking at the positions from the Southeast, positions from someone like Professor Ben Mwabueze. We've been looking at positions from the Ibadan Declaration. We've been looking at the position from the South-South on resource control, resource nationalism, and so on. And we've been looking at positions from northern minorities and so on. So, and I, even from the other day, I was together with the Northern CAN, where they had a one-day brainstorming session on restructuring. A lot has been going on, I must tell you.
Now, from your experience so far, from your interactions so far, this conference is going to be a Northern Nigerian conference.
Yes.
That indicates that even the northern minorities and even those who call themselves the Middle Belt are part of this exercise. Is there some convergence as at now?
Of course, maybe you know that I'm a TIV man, Christian from Benue State.
That's right.
And I'm a former Secretary General of the Middle Belt Forum. My father was a member of Parliament of the United Middle Belt Congress and an official of that party. So if there's anybody, perhaps in this country, who is Middle Belt, this is the one. This is Yima here, is one such person. So, I mean, if I tell you that I'm going to present a key paper there, it's on the myths and reality of the whole question of restructuring. So, there are certain things that are part of our fallacies and myths and maybe misrepresentations in this country. When the British colonized us, we were told that we were about 250 ethnic groups in this country. Now we moved on to research work at the University of Ibadan, which told us that we were about 400. Research work at the University of Jos told that we were more than 500. The latest research work is saying that we're about 646 ethnic groups in this country. Now I expect that this will continue as people disaggregate from bigger communities or ethnic entities into smaller ones. In a nutshell, I'm saying that we have more than 600 ethnic groups in this country. More than 400 of them are in the area called the 19 northern states. More than 400. Now, the north is usually conceptualized as Hausa Fulani, Muslim. That is the popular conceptualization of the north. But when you look at the north with more than 400 ethnic groups, and when you see that, okay, the major linguistic group is the Hausa, which is actually both an ethnic and a linguistic group. In other words, you have a Hausa ethnic group, and then you have a Hausa linguistic group. The Hausa linguistic group may be the most populous in Nigeria. I use the term maybe because some of the statistics in Nigeria are quite challengeable. But in any case, it is conceivable to assume that the Hausa ethnic group is the most populous in Nigeria. The Hausa linguistic group is even bigger than Nigeria. It goes into Chad, Niger, all the way up to Mali, down to Ghana, to Benin Republic, Guinea, and so on. It goes deep into the Sudan. It is a very large linguistic group. It's almost like the Swahili in East Africa or Eastern Africa. So, of these 400 plus ethnic groups, if you remove the Hausa ethnic group, you still have 400. If you remove the Fulani ethnic group, you still have 400. If you remove the Kanuri, you still have more than 400. If you remove the other maybe non-Hausa groups like the Tiv, the Idoma, the Nupe, well, Nupe may be called the Lesser Hausa or the Nupe Banza Bakwe, so they're still Hausa, according to historians and anthropologists. But whatever you remove, you will still have 400 ethnic groups that are in northern Nigeria, that are not Fulani, are not Hausa, and are not Tiv, or Kanuri, which are the major ethnic groups in the north. You will still have 400 ethnic groups. That is the reality of the, let me call it anthroposociology of the north. So we need to understand who is in Nigeria when we talk about categories. So ethnic categories and so on before we, I think, arrive at the correct political analysis of some of these situations, yes.
So what you are saying in effect is that it may not be very possible to have a convergence of views of these different and diverse ethnic groups.
It is already happening. As I told you, I was with the Northern CAN the other day. Northern CAN. as Christians in the north. And they are represented in the committee of the northern traditional rulers and Northern Governors Committee on this subject matter. The secretary of that committee is Professor Sonny Tioden, the deputy governor of Plateau State, who was my friend and classmate from Gindiri, which is a missionary school. He's the secretary of that committee. The chairman of that committee is the governor of Sokoto State. So you can see the balance. If there's anybody, this gentleman has been the vice chancellor of the University of Jos. And he comes from the Mwagavul community in Plateau State. So the two of them represent the contrariety of the North. And they are anchoring this process. And I'm telling you also that inside that committee, you have members of Northern Kan. So which means that you have representatives from all the 19 states. And of these 19 northern states, if you count them, you'll be surprised that the ones that you may say are purely Fulani may be 2 or 3. The ones that are purely Hausa, I don't know. Maybe Kano, maybe. Is Kaduna purely Hausa? It is not. So there is this mix that people do not appreciate. And some of the political elements of the political elite do not help matters. Because they're only interested in the manipulation of difference for power. So they do not have the patience to give people scientific and empirical analysis of our real sociology in Nigeria. If you look at our history, if you look at our political economy, you look at our sociology, we're not as different as people make us to be. I'm sitting here, I'm a Bantu person. If you go back into anthropology, most of my people are not in Nigeria. They're in Central, Southern, and Eastern Africa. The major, but I'm here in West Africa with people who are maybe Hamitic or Sahelian, or people who are Negroid. We are here trying to build the most important nation state in the world, black nation state in the world. That's what we represent. With 646 ethnic groups. Compare this to South Africa, for example, where they have 3 races. South Africa has 3 races: Europeans, Asians, and Africans. Yeah. Then they have within the Africans several tribes. They call themselves the Rainbow Nation. And they're trying to build one nation, one community. They came from apartheid, which they fought and destroyed, and they're now trying to build a new nation. We didn't have a history of apartheid here. What we did was we were amalgamated in 1914 from communities that were already interacting with each other before the British amalgamated us in 1914. We were already interacting with each other. We were not in what do you call them, compartments. We were interacting across communities, trading, intermarrying, fighting, and so on, exchanging language and so on. That is why the Fulani, for example, today have created a hybrid, or are involved in a hybrid called the Hausa-Fulani hybrid. This has been created historically. If you go way back into history, there was nothing like a Hausa-Fulani hybrid, but it does exist today. The Korarafa community, which was small but had some, influence, is also integrated into other communities. The coastal communities, of course, you had your Oyos and Benins and Ifes and very rich historically, traditionally, and also very powerful politically. And they existed before the British came. But can you now say that Benin, for example, never had any interactions with the Yorubas or the Igbos or people from northern Nigeria? How come you have Obi of Onitsha, Obi, and then you have Oba? Is there some similarity there? Obi, Oba? How come you have those things? And those of the experts in history will tell you that the relationship are much more deep than what I'm trying to portray here. I know that my people, the team, got the name Munchi from the Fulani people through interaction. Why? There was this controversy over cattle and women. And so we got the nickname Munchi This has been, when we left wherever we were coming to Nigeria from, Central Africa or Cameroon or Congo or wherever, or South Africa or wherever, we didn't have the name Munchi. We got it in Nigeria through social interaction. See, so a lot of these dynamic processes have been taking place.
Okay. So
And in the era of globalization, it's even more profound because people are creolizing. The whole of what you have in Lagos is a Creole community. Brazilian Lagosians, Cuban Lagosians, all the way up to Sierra Leone and Liberia. You have this Creole culture, which is neither here nor there. Nobody owns it. It's an Afro-modernist culture.
All right, let's come back to this whole question of restructuring. Let's try and conceptualize it, because it seems to me that is the concept, is the differences in conceptualization that may have led to the misunderstandings about whether or not one group of people want restructuring or the others do not want restructuring and all of that. For you, and possibly peeping into the mind of the North, what does restructuring represent?
Restructuring, like I said earlier, is nothing really new. It has, I think, acquired some prominence and urgency, perhaps in the last 2 years or so. Well, there are people who will give you political reasons for that, but I don't want to go into that. The point really is that it is a continuous process, and it has actually been enacted in 4 ways. We have had the creation of constitutions in our history. The last one is this 1999 Constitution, which actually is just an improvement or a revision of the 1979 Constitution, the presidential Constitution. But before then, you had others, many others, Republican, you had Littleton, Macpherson, and so on, several constitutions. What does that tell us? That there have been efforts at restructuring historically. That is one area. The second area is the creation of regions and states. We started this country with 2 protectorates amalgamated into 1 colony, divided into 3 regions, then 4 regions, and then 12 states, all the way up to now 36. We have 36 states and Abuja. That is restructuring. We've also had all sorts of conferences, colonial time conferences, post-colonial conferences, up to the last one, which was in 2014. So I call them conferences, meetings, and committees. My favorite actually is the 1986 Political Bureau by Babangida, which was very profound, and somebody has described it as the most participatory of all those conferences in our history, because the people went all the way out into, I participated in them. I remember attending meetings at NIPS and in JOS and so on. It came out with some recommendation. Then you had the 2014, which is the most recent. So we've had conferences, we've had meetings, and we've had committees. Some of these conferences produced constitutions, some of them did not. But at least they were concerned about restructuring. Then we've also had what we call the fiscal decentralization, fiscal arrangement committees. I think that from 1946 up until we have now this revenue mobilization commission, which actually is to deal with these questions of what do we do with the resources of this country. Then the 4th area is has had to do with I've talked about constitutions, conferences, revenue mobilization, and then test creation. So the 4 areas. The 4 areas have all been restructuring efforts. It's a continuous process. It has always, in fact, I have said somewhere that this is probably what we have done best in this country, restructuring.
So there's nothing extraordinary about this fresh agitation for restructuring in Nigeria, because according to you, we have been in perpetual restructuring mode.
Yes, that's what we've been doing. What is more challenging now is that you also have what I would call centrifugal threats, very severe centrifugal challenges like secessionist challenges, mixed up with the restructuring process.
Okay.
It's almost like we either give us our states or we restructure. So this is what has made it different. But this is coming with an ultimatum. In the past, there were really no ultimatums. When you had this struggle or quarrel over the June 12 issue, nobody actually gave an ultimatum that if you don't give us June 12 or you don't give, maybe allow a Southwesterner to become president, then we're going to go. Maybe it was subtle, but not as strong as it is today.
So what would you say, what would you attribute these, the current trends to?
There is a strong secessionist threat, which is also using this question of how do we address basically three issues in the Nigerian Federation: equity, fairness, and justice. And all along, all these four modes of restructuring have attempted to address these issues. If you look at the provision in the Constitution, for example, about federal character, it does suggest that you don't marginalize people politically. And to some extent, it is working. Because you see that even with the composition of the federal government, at the executive level, at the legislative level, at the judiciary level, you will see that there's always an effort to have this federal character. In the federal, in the executive arm of government, you have ministers from each state of the federation. And that is also replicated within the MDAs, the ministries, departments, and agencies of government. You have an effort to make sure that each state is represented. Yeah, down the line, from PEMSEC, let's say from minister, ambassador, PEMSEC directors, deputy directors, all the way down to drivers and cleaners. It is expected that the federal character will be carried out. And you can see that, let's take from the top. Almost every state is represented at the ministerial level. This is part of the conditions within which the federal character insists that Nigeria must be governed. Some people are even saying that the federal character principle should actually be based on local governments, that there is greater equity when you do that at the local government level than when you do it at the level of the states. Some people are insisting that should be, one part of the restructuring process should be that. Then, of course, you have the National Assembly. In the National Assembly, you have 3 senators from each state. It doesn't matter how many you are or how much land mass you have. Bayelsa has 3 senators, Lagos has 3 senators, Kano has 3 senators in the National Assembly. The same applies for members of the House of Representatives. They are represented on the basis of states. So in the legislative arm of government, you have equity, or at least an attempt at equity, right? In the judiciary, you also have that process, and so on. So the problems of equity, of fairness, and of justice, there have been attempts to address these questions. Maybe we need to do more. Maybe we need to do more, but perhaps not in the direction that certain members of the elite are telling us that we are wrong. Maybe. Because the elite have become very selfish and greedy. And they transfer that selfishness and greed onto national discourse and onto political praxis. So it becomes a problem. They incite the subjects, say, oh, you are being cheated. So what we want now to know is, we want to see empirical evidence, for example, of marginalization, if it is political marginalization. Because the evidence of economic marginalization is such that some of the people who are crying that they're the most marginalized are actually the ones dominating the economy. That is the empirical reality. And socially, those who control social intercourse, whether it's through the media or through media content or through social mobility, are there any hindrances to social mobility in Nigeria? Who controls social consciousness? That is social mobilization. Whose culture is dominant? So these are the questions. What about, social mobilization, political mobilization, economic mobilization, yes. Marginalization.
And at what point the people are being marginalized? At what point in time? I mean, when you talk of all these three,
yes,
you must place them within
historical,
continuum.
Yeah, the continuum.
Yes.
Where did you start from? Where were you today? I believe that what has happened over time is that because of the concern about equity, fairness, and justice, all these four modes of restructuring have attempted to address them. Now, I'm saying that maybe there are still areas, of course, and that applies to all nations. Black Lives Matter in the United States is still a struggle with racism in that country. So, but what do you do with that? Racism seems even to have come back. But just yesterday, the Americans had an African-American president. So I think that the elite must be blamed for this. The real people who are marginalized are the poor in Nigeria. The elite who come into government, they take away the money meant for the construction of roads and railways. They pocket the money. So we'll travel on roads that are bad. Then they will come and tell us that it is ethnicity or religion. It is criminal, Imoni. The elite create these problems and then turn around and blame who? Whip up ethnic and tribal sentiments. Why don't we have good roads in Nigeria after so many years of money from crude oil, which is going to become unimportant in the next few years? Where did we put that money? Okay, maybe we built Abuja. But where is our modern railway system? Where are our roads? Why don't we have power? Is it because of ethnicity and tribalism that we don't have power or roads in this country?
I was just going to come to that,
yes.
Dr. Yima. I'm going to talk about how all these attempts
yes.
at balancing,
yes.
at fairness, at equity
yes.
Has impacted on nation building.
Yes.
How much challenge has that posed to the real issue of nation building
yes.
over the years?
In fact, you said you were going to come to that, but I already started discussing it before you came to it.
Yes.
The elite are responsible for this problem. Let's go to Ghana. In the early days of Ghana's struggle for independence, leaders like Nkrumah lifted the Ghanaians above ethnic divides in Ghana to consider themselves Africans because of the ideology of Pan-Africanism. Your average Ghanaian would tell you I'm an African from Ghana. Your average Nigerian would tell you I'm a Shekiri from Nigeria in Africa. So it's the other way around. And over time, the politicians have used ethnicity and religion as an excuse for their crimes in this country. There is no reason why we do not have good roads in this country. There's no reason why we do not have good enough housing in this country. Compare Nigeria with other African countries or other developing country communities in the world. People talk about the Asian tigers, Malaysia, Singapore, that we are ahead of, but have now overtaken us. What went wrong? What happened in Singapore? Somebody stood up and said, look, I'm going to develop this place. I don't care what political system I use. The important thing that it has to develop. And it happened. I'm talking about Lee Kuan Yew. And an English poet has told us, Alexander Pope, for forms of government, let fools contest. What is best administered is best. That is what Gaddafi did in Libya. What is best administered is best. He created his own system. I read the Green Book. He created his own system. I'm a student of politics. So I know that the structures and the systems of government do not deliver development or happiness to you. What did Aristotle say about politics? Politics is supposed to give us happiness. Laws and constitutions are only supposed to assist that process. The Magna Carta of England, for example, is not as detailed as the Nigerian constitution. But there is an understanding that this is who we are in Britain or the United Kingdom, and we must develop a power which they developed and which has taken a large share of global territory. They conquered some of the best and colonized some of the best territory in the world. And their language is the language of globalization. It's the dominant language in the world today, from the English in the United Kingdom. Because they were able to galvanize themselves and understand, okay, you are Scottish, you are Irish, I'm English, but we'll work together. And they did that successfully. That's why they were even able to defeat Germany twice in 2 world wars, which they led with their allies against Germany, and the last one, Germany, Italy, and Japan.
We must therefore begin to think of how to recreate the Nigeria of our dreams.
We must.
The Nigeria that can transform and translate all of these ideas that you're talking about now
Imoni, it is possible
into practical terms.
It is possible to transform this country called Nigeria within 4 or 5 years. You have the resources, human and material. Populations are assets. This was an old debate between Malthus and Ricardo. And I think Ricardo has won the debate. If you take the example of China and India, examples of China and India, Nigeria is going to be the 3rd most populous country in the next few years. So are we going to end up being like China or India or Somalia? Somalia is one of the most homogeneous countries on earth. It is one of the most failed states on earth. So heterogeneity is an asset. Difference is good. That is the way that God created us in this world. America is different. Who created America? Europeans, rebels, and people fleeing from Europe came to America, took over land, territory belonging to Amerindians, brought slaves from Africa, and created the most powerful country in the world today. And they're sitting on top of difference. I just gave an example of South Africa, more different than Nigeria. 3 races, Europeans, Asians, Africans. The Africans subdivided into ethnic groups. They are going on. They are better organized than we are. We sit here with all the resources that God has given any African country. You sit with somebody who will tell you that the problem of Nigeria is some Fulani person in Sokoto. The person is talking to you in a community where he will not tell you that about 5 of his brothers are in jails from China to South Africa to Malaysia. Was it those people that sent them to jail there? Okay, you're going to some other country that is working. What did you try to do here that didn't work that you have to go there? You have federation, you have federal states. I've gone on some of the states. My state has not done well. When I go to Gombe, Gombe has done well. I go to Borno, Borno has done well. Even with the insurgency, Borno is doing well in terms of infrastructure and development. I've gone to Kano. Maybe they're aspiring to become another Dubai. I just came from Kaduna today. Kaduna is trying to go somewhere. That is within this same structure, which some people say is not working. And I tell you, when I was in Kenya, when they were going through the process of constitutional review, they were actually hoping that they would become like Nigeria in terms of their political structure. They were looking up to the Nigerian federal structure to see if it would work. People run away from a federal structure and go into unitary states that are working. Some of the most prosperous states in the world are unitary states. So there is this myth that once you have decentralization or a federation, that you will solve your problem. You are going to, if you have more decentralization, you are going to have greater decentralization of fraud and corruption and evil. It will be in smaller units, so it will perhaps be more deadly. At least now there's some big Nigerian federal structure which is able to, even with all its weaknesses, maintain some policing role over what could have been worse. For forms of government, let fools contest. What is best administered is best. Structures and forms of government do not give you happiness. Leadership and good governance, equity, fairness, and justice, which you can even have in a unitary state. You can even have in a constitutional monarchy. You can even have in a benevolent dictatorship. It gives you, once you deliver, people are happy. That's what they want. The opportunities are created for people to excel. Today, if you say, for example, you come from a state where you are worried about JAMB, some of these people have a lot of money that they're building estates in their villages. Why don't you establish a university like the one I teach at? It's a young man who built my university. He built a university. I've graduated many students. I hear they call me from all over the world. For 5 years now, I've been teaching at that university. It was created by somebody with private resources. If you think that the JAMB is a problem, go and create 20 private universities so that JAMB becomes irrelevant. So the arguments are hollow and they're silly.
I had the opportunity of looking through the background document to the Kaduna Conference.
Yes.
And there they were describing some of the views and the opinion that had been expressed about restructuring and what is popularly called through federalism.
Yes.
As imprecise, inaccurate, incoherent terms that have succeeded in creating arguments that have, as it were, created more confusion
Yes.
in the Nigerian system. What exactly does that mean for you?
There has been a mixture of hate communication together with the debate on restructuring. That is a problem. Because there's so much hate communication mixed with this discussion of restructuring. And there's no clarity. It is a continuation of this elite mischief. If you ask me now, I'm sure by now you would have known clearly where I would stand on restructuring. I believe that maybe you need a renaissance, like the European Renaissance. Maybe you need the cultural revolution, like the Chinese Cultural Revolution. Maybe you need something more fundamental than structures. Maybe we're looking at the debate between structuralism and culturalism in the history of social science. Do structures determine who we are, or cultures? Can the two mix? When they mix, who influences whom? What influences what more? Is this structuralism that influences culturalism, or vice versa? But as far as I'm concerned, if you have the finest structure in this community called Nigeria, and it does not change the mindset of Nigerian people, especially the elite, nothing will change.
How do we go about that? I mean, because as it were, the elite seem to dominate the political space.
Substantially negatively, I would tell you.
Yes, they are the ones who have come up with this whole concept of restructuring, the whole concept of true federalism. And like I asked a guest on this program the other day, how many of the ordinary people in their various regions have they carried along in this debate?
Nobody. They're speaking for themselves. They're talking to power for themselves. One of our leading political scientists, Okudiba Noli, in his book, Ethnic Politics in Nigeria, has addressed this question. People are looking for states so that they will become lords. Give me my own state so that I will be a lord, so that I can go there and collect returns from a governor, so that I can decide who becomes minister, or I can decide who becomes what, for the benefit of elite gratification. If you build a railway road from Lagos to Calabar, does it not cut across different communities?
It does.
Who is going to move on that road?
Nigerians. This
new capital of Abuja here, where we are speaking, who lives in Abuja?
Nigerians.
Right. So is it possible that you can do things that are pan-Nigerian with the present structure that we have? If that is possible, then why is it not happening? What is the problem? Elite, self-deception, manipulation, greed, and criminal mindsets. I told you, 4 to 5 years, you sort out this place called Nigeria to the happiness, substantially the happiness of people. What do you need? Infrastructure and services. What are those infrastructure? A modern railway system, a modern road network, power. Even with what we have now, if the power system in Nigeria today is too centralized, you can decentralize it within the same framework. Sometimes we're able to supply power to other African countries. Are they states of Nigeria? They are not. If you build a road from here to Benin Republic is not a part of Nigeria, but it's benefiting from the resources of Nigeria. In fact, I think there's supposed to be a Mombasa to Dakar African highway. Must pass through Nigeria. So if every country contributes to that, what are you building? You're building Pan-African economic integration, which is what Europe has done.
Now, Dr. Sen, let's look at the expected outcomes from the Kaduna Conference. What should we be looking at? I mean, given the very multifarious challenges that Nigeria as a nation has gone through in 57 years.
Yes.
And the attempt
yes.
at regenerating the Nigerian nation. What are those expectations?
Very good. At the level of managing difference, the 19 northern states provide a very good replica of the rest of Nigeria. 3 main religions, animism, Christianity and Islam, are here. multi-linguistic profile of the country. I told you, ethnic groups alone are more than 400. The difference, of course, gender difference, ethnic difference, religious difference, if you are able to bring these people together as different as they are, and they're able to find a common ground, it means that it will be easier for the rest of Nigeria. It's like they're speaking on behalf of the rest of Nigeria. They will also be in a position to understand what is coming out from other parts of Nigeria. They have a responsibility because of their land area, which is approaching 80% of the total land area of Nigeria, about 78%, I think. The population was about 55%. So really, if they can get it right, or begin to get it right at this level, it might be easier for the rest of the country to understand really where the bulk of Nigerians are going. So I expect that the Kaduna Conference will process the real feelings of people from this part of the country, examine what is coming from other parts of the country, take what is coming from the other components like the positions or maybe people like the Arewa Consultative Forum, Northern Elders Forum, the Middle Belt Forum, Northern Khan, Jamia Nasri Islam, and all the other interest groups in this community. We hope that they can be aggregated at this conference and passed on, maybe to the level of the traditional rulers and governors committee, and then that will be then become available for a more informed and knowledge-based national discourse on this matter. What we have seen so far is not encouraging. I will tell you that if, for example, you come to me and say that we should have 8 regions as federal regions, and that each region should have a constitution, and you have a regional police, then I would tell that you are just trying to secede through the back door. It's just a secession through the back door. Why? Why do you need, we're not mature enough to have it. This is my position. We're not mature now to have state police. We can have community policing, but it will be abused. It can become a regional army. In 1967, what Ojukwu did was to simply go back to eastern Nigeria and just take over everything that was there. That's what he did. It becomes easier for you to secede. If you have a regional police, you can. The origins of the Nigerian army are from the West African Frontier Force, which combined police and army. It was developed from there. It is very easy. I saw it happen as a teenager at the beginning of the Civil War. They came to Boko, put huge trailers, the main cities of my community, and just packed young men there, went and gave them 3 weeks training and sent them to the war front. So if you have a police that is regional, to convert it into an army, it will take you maybe 1 week. And the way that some politicians speak, they will do that. We have not seen the responsibility coming from political leadership that we warrant you're giving them small armed units, legitimated as police. This is my personal opinion. I may be wrong. But that's the way I see it. Because I believe that, yes, we should do restructuring to the extent that we continue from what we have been doing and pay attention on the ethical or the moral or the cultural, which is how do our minds, do we respect other people as God's creatures on earth? Why do we disrespect other people? I monitor the social media every day. What I see in the social media is horrible. There are some people who have never moved from their part of the country to another part of the country. What they say about other parts of the country shows that there is a huge problem. And the elite, they promote this kind of thing. I have been to every state in this country. I left my community from Benue as a young man and went to the University of Lagos deliberately. When I left the University of Lagos, I went to do my youth corps in the old, eastern Nigeria, in Enugu. Later, I went back to work in the South on a community development project that took me to all the major areas on the Soku, Kula, Ogoniland, and so on. Did some work there in the field. I have been to every state in this country. This is a beautiful piece of estate given to us by God. The people who want to destroy this piece of estate are actually criminals. I'm speaking on national television. I want them to know that I, Yima Sen, said that they are criminals and they will not succeed.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Yima Sen, who is an academician, a lecturer at Base University, member Northern Elders Forum, and of course, he is part of the team, the Arewa Research Development Program, that is putting together the two-day conference that is taking place in Kaduna on Wednesday and Thursday this week. That's on the 10th and 11th, I believe, or 11th and 12th.
No, 12th and 13th.
Of this month. Yes. And we'll be giving you a full coverage of that conference. And everyone, I'm sure, will be looking forward to the outcomes of that conference, like you've said. So. The North has had the benefit of watching all the other zones and regions come up with their own positions. Now the North will try to see if it can then begin to work or consult with these other regions to forge a stronger Nigeria. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Imoni.
Dr. Yima Sen. My name is Imoni Amare. Please join us again when we bring you another edition of People, Politics and Power on Tuesday. Bye for now. And do have yourself a very wonderful day for the rest of today.